Aloha and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jürgen Steinmetz, joining you from livestream.travel here in Honolulu, together with eTurboNews and Hawaii News Online. With us, as always, is Dr. Peter Tarlow in College Station, Texas. And today we have a guest who's joining us from Jamaica. Peter will introduce Andrew Spencer, who's quite a known figure in the Caribbean. And he just finished a book. So we're going to be talking about this book and the future of travel to the Caribbean islands, and it'll be an interesting session. Peter, it's beautiful and sunny today. I see from my window a lot of people are at the beach, and there are a lot of sailing boats out there, so I don't know how it is in College Station.
Well, the sun is shining, though it's supposedly going to rain tomorrow, but I'll let you know tomorrow. But today we had pretty much blue skies with a little bit of clouds and about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So it was a little bit cool, a little bit windy, but pretty good. And it's really, you can tell that spring is on its way. So summer is eventually going to be here. The cold, really cold, bitter cold is gone, and flowers are starting, and we're starting to see green on the trees, which is always a good sign. So that's
really, Peter, what we all need. We need warmer weather to get rid of this virus. And what better places on earth there are than the Caribbean, specifically where you are quite close. And so I'm excited to talk about Jamaica and the Caribbean.
Yes. So I have my friend, kind of my adopted little brother in Jamaica, Dr. Andrew Spencer, who's a professor at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. And I had the privilege of, we wrote a book together. And that book was based on the concepts. Here's a picture of it. Hopefully people can see it. It's called Tourism Safety and Security for the Caribbean. And I know Andrew's going to start speaking about it, but having worked in this field for a long time, I can tell you that for the Caribbean to have a renaissance after COVID, the first issue it's going to have to tackle is the lack of safety and security. And that was one of the reasons that we wrote this book, not from just Jamaica, it's for the entire Caribbean. So maybe Andrew, you want to start and then we'll go back and forth.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Peter. And thank you, Jürgen, for having me. Peter, you hit the nail on the head. So the timing of this book is spot on, yeah? Because gone are the days when we're talking about hygiene factors from Hertzberg, which looked at some very basic things in terms of hotel cleanliness and issues that people are concerned about, that if they were absent, they would cause your product to be uncompetitive. The biggest issue today is safety and security. If you think about what's been happening, we did a lot of work on this book, and this book looked at Jamaica, looked at St. Lucia, looked at other places, but what this book is really is a book that can be applicable to other Caribbean territories. And in fact, I would take it even further, Peter. It's a book that will help small island developing states to get a better grasp of their own safety situation. And I just like our process in getting this book done was to take a very holistic look at what the issues are and to propose things that were very context specific. Yeah, so it wasn't just another universal set of ideas about how to treat with these issues. But I mean, Peter, we went through a whole series of issues. We looked at tourism security. And in fact, one of the things that you and I discussed a lot was this issue of tourism surety and the notion of well-being. Right. And we looked at, things that you have worked on in the past that had to do with tourism-oriented policing, which is a very different type of policing from hard policing, but it's also one that asserts authority in a space while ensuring that the experience is not compromised. But we would have been remiss, Jürgen, if we didn't look in this book at issues to do with health and the pandemic. And so, as Peter rightly said, everything that comes in the aftermath of the pandemic is going to rest heavily on the ability to give assurance about safety. And if you get me started on destination assurance, I'll go on all night. So over to you.
Well, we won't let you go on all night, but I think, you really brought some of the key elements that the two of us worked on. We were very lucky. We did have a good database to start to begin with. And one of the things we wanted to do was to avoid crises. And I tell people all the time, the way to have good crisis management is not to have a crisis. So we wanted to look at every way that countries, especially some of the smaller countries, are isolated places. And it wouldn't matter if you're talking about the Seychelles in the Indian Oceans, or you're talking about Trinidad in the Caribbean, but all of them have certain commonalities that were really important. And we wanted to show those. And we wanted to show that policing can be used in a positive way. So instead of having people be afraid of the police, that we wanted to create a security element where people were look forward to being with the police. And that's a whole different way. We talked about the importance of learning how to smile. We talked about the importance of going through a hotel and understanding. A hotel might say, we have a wall around ourselves. Well, what do you mean? Do you mean a 1 meter wall or 10 meter wall? And those are, they're both walls, but they're very different walls. Yeah. So our goal was in this, and Andrew, of course, you'll jump in. The two of us were like peas in a pod as we were writing this book, and we were back and forth all the time. But what are some of the problems that people face? How could it, we didn't write the book to be a novel. It was meant to be a very practical guide that people could use to turn, to go to the concept of surety. And maybe I just mentioned that when we talk about surety, we're talking about the ideas of safety, security, economics, reputation, health, that point where they all come together. And so and then how do you give people the knowledge to be able to handle a black swan event? Because you can never be prepared for everything in this world. No one was prepared for COVID. There it was. So how do we deal with those? How do we train people not from what was, but from what will be when we don't know what will be in the future? Yeah. So I think that was one of the ideas, Andrew, that the two of us thought about.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things you just said, which I think is the biggest sort of dilemma for Caribbean territories, is that integration. How do you have that kind of seamless integration between policing and the need for safety and security, while also ensuring that, tourism is built on the notion of freedom and hedonistic pleasure. How do you have that peacefully coexist with a state that can be considered to be safe and secure? And so that's what the book helps to guide policymakers on. It allows for what I hinted at earlier, destination assurance. We like to talk about that. And in fact, recently put an entry in a tourism encyclopedia on that, because we want that to become a buzzword, which is some of what Peter mentioned earlier as a part of surety, which is safety, security, and seamlessness. So we go back to that argument about that organic weaving together of the two, while ensuring that at the end of the day, the guest leaves and doesn't even recognize all of the things that are in the background, making sure that their experience is optimal. So it's an exciting read.
One of the problems we had to face, we had a number of problems we had to face. One is that in today's world, you just don't go to a hotel. Once upon a time, it was a multi-story hotel. They could put a fence around themselves or a wall around themselves. Now you have all sorts of ways that people stay. They could be in Airbnbs. They could be in motels. They could be in single-story units. People are staying with family and friends, and we have to protect them also. So one of the things that you and I faced was, how do you even find these people sometimes to protect them? It's not so easy. Sure. And the other, and so and then the other part of it is, if they're coming to see family and friends, which is very possible, but then they're going to a festival or they're going out to dinner, they're in the economy, but they're not in the economy. And then in the time of COVID, we really had that as a challenge to communicate. And one last challenge, I think that, or the many challenges, was multiculturalism.
Yes.
Because people, and maybe you're in Jamaica, so you know it, but Jamaica has its own particular culture, as does each country in the Caribbean. And then you get people coming from North America, principally, but also from Europe, and they come with a very different set of standards. And so one perfect example of that is Jamaicans are very touchy-feely. They when I go to Jamaica, everybody hugs me. But sometimes people from, especially the Anglo world, Britain, Canada, the United States are much more standoffish, so that getting a hug feels like a sexual attack versus just a sign of caring and love. And so how do we train people to understand the different cultures? Because those two are risks. It's not a risk that you're going to fall, but it's a risk that you're going to be upset, destroy the reputation of the place, and then maybe go home and sue, which turns into a whole nother risk.
Yeah, you're right. And to add to the challenges is this whole issue of what I call the multiplicity of the moving parts.
Yes.
There's just so many variables to consider in the tourism space. And so this book was really intended to bring structure in a chaotic world and in a chaotic space.
Brilliantly said. I agree. We ought to be co-authors.
Maybe, we should write a book. What do you think?
As a matter of fact, actually, I think I can say that our next book, because Dr. Spencer and I are going to be writing another book, and that book is going to be on the whole issue of human trafficking and the world of tourism, which is something, and that's not just a Caribbean problem. That's a problem throughout the entire world. Yes, and it's been going, once upon a time, they called it slavery. Now we don't use the word slavery anymore, but there's not much difference between trafficking and slavery. They're boy, are they close. Oh, and yeah. How we sell people and use people, and what's being done. And we see all the trafficking that's going on now in Mexico as children and women are being so abused. With the border crisis, these are issues we cannot avoid, and we're going to have to really look at those very seriously, because unfortunately, in tourism, some of those issues have taken place.
Yeah.
I
mean, Peter, just listening to you talk about these issues just reminds me of something I've always appreciated. And it's your genuine love for the Caribbean. I think that's an important thing for me to say.
Yes.
It's for a while we even considered giving you citizenship in Jamaica. Yeah? Because
I am still hoping I get it.
You attack these issues not just from a purely academic perspective, but you attack them. Well, first of all, you're a pra-academic, right? So you attack them with very practical solutions, but you also attack them from a place of empathy and just trying to work through these issues for the most workable solution. So,
and that's really one of the keys to tourism security. First of all, if you're in the tourism industry and you don't like people, you ought to find another job. And secondly, tourism security is all based on our empathy and our love for our fellow human beings.
Yeah.
And if we have that sense of caring, of wanting people to have a good time, and then how can you not love being in the Caribbean? The water is beautiful, the land is great, the food is wonderful, people give you all the hugs you could ever want. And for those—
No, Peter, that has changed. COVID has fixed that issue. The one you're talking—
Too bad.
Being touchy-feely. Yeah, we've started to step back a bit.
Okay, maybe but I think for people who don't know, and now we're going to be Jamaica specific. If you have not been to Jamaica, the theme of Jamaica is one love. Yeah. And let's get together and have a good time. And of course, it's from the music of Bob Marley. But really, when you cannot be in the Caribbean and not fall in love with the people, the food, the culture. And if we can create safe and secure places for people to come, then you know what? We're going to be in a post-COVID world, and the Caribbean is going to come back stronger and better than ever. But we got to create the sense of safety and security for that to happen.
From your lips to God's ears.
Thank you. That's a very famous Hebrew expression. So good for you. Andrew, I know we only had about 15 minutes and our time is up. But I want to really thank you. I'm looking forward to writing our next book together. And I will be in Jamaica, God willing. I got my shots. So I'm...
well done. You've got the second dose as well?
I have the second dose also. So I have a bunch of projects I have to do through April, but I'll be with you in May and June. And I'm looking forward to some chicken jerky and beef jerky and having a great Caribbean, it's a great Caribbean meal. And by the way, wonderful coffee. If you have not been to the Caribbean, the coffee is spectacular. So
amazing. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure. And we'll talk some more. Okay.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Safe, everyone.
And Jürgen and I are going to continue with the rest of the news of the day for a few moments.
Yes, Peter, interesting session, and I wish Andrew and you all the success with this book. I know it's not the first book you have with.
No,
You've
many.
done a lot of books, and actually, if you go to Amazon and just search for Dr. Peter Tarlow, you'll find a whole section of books.
And I think we have something on our webpage.
Safertourism.com. You
Yes,
scroll down and you see actually a link to the Amazon page with many of the books included. So this one should
Yes,
probably
yes.
also pop up if Amazon is selling it.
yes. And there'll be another book coming out in just a few weeks, in about 2 weeks, on personal resilience. Because we didn't mention, but we should have, that in Jamaica, they have a really famous resilience center. And that's, of course, resilience for tourism. So I have a book coming out with a colleague in England on personal resilience, how to survive and thrive during times of isolation and pandemics. And even though, God willing, this pandemic, we keep hoping it's over, but the news today from Europe was not very good. I see there were riots across Germany and in Holland and in Italy, and I think England, all had, there's a big struggle with many people saying they don't want to follow the lockdown rules anymore. And of course, health officials saying you really need to. And that's impacting the whole European tourism world. So that's part of today's world, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is. And it's of course, it's not only Europe, people are getting fed up with lockdowns, and that's, I mean, we're all social animals, so we don't really like to isolate. So it's against what I think humans
Nature.
human nature. But it's important to really manage this crisis, because the more we screw up, the worse it's going to get. And
Yeah.
it takes a lot of patience, it takes a lot of money, and it wipes out businesses. So this is not a good situation.
No, it's a really hard situation. And of course, the industry that has most been hurt by this is the tourism industry. So we really want to find ways for the tourism industry to get back on its feet. Now, we are seeing there are a number of countries now that are really doing a good job of vaccinating their citizens. And of course, the more people who are vaccinated, the closer we're getting to herd immunity. But there are 6 billion people on this earth? There are a lot of people. And that takes a lot of vaccine to get people through. And then, of course, the other problem is that some new strains are developing. And those strains, and not all the vaccines are capable of handling every strain. So there's probably going to be a need at some point to have a booster shot. And it may be somewhat like when we get the flu shot, it'll be a yearly event. But you know what? You're better off getting a vaccination than you are getting COVID. So I say that all till I'm blue in the face. Please, if you can get vaccinated, don't blow it. Get vaccinated, because that's really, you're helping yourself and you're helping your fellow men and women.
Yeah, and people are getting creative. I mean, today we did a story you find on eTurboNews about 5-star resorts in the Caribbean, including in Jamaica, are now providing an insurance, I would say. They call it a membership. So when you stay with these resorts like the Tarlow Club or Jade Mountain in St. Lucia or Hermitage Bay or several others, they're listed here, and you do get the virus, they actually send you home in a private jet. And this program was just extended also to domestic trips. So if you live in Texas and you get sick in New York, a private jet can take you home instead of being stranded in a hotel room you don't want to be for 2 weeks, because most people developing this virus are not getting seriously sick.
No.
Most people, actually, it's less than a flu. It's just a cold. Yeah. But what is so dangerous about it, you can give it to other people. So that's why isolation is so important.
Yes. Well, remember that the COVID virus is a coronavirus, as it's related to the flu, it's related to colds. So colds, of course, are also very contagious. Well, anything else really important? I was busy all day today, so I didn't really have a chance to look at lots of the news. But is there anything else outstanding that we want to talk about a little bit before we say goodbye to people?
Well,
Um,
of course, there's news, there's developing news constantly, and we will have some of the segments you will hear later on today in regards to what is happening. For instance, the Bahamas Ministry of Tourism is welcoming back Royal Caribbean International Cruises. What's going to
oh,
be a first for the Caribbean, what may be a game changer if they can actually operate this, in a way that it's safe.
safe.
And we had Alain St. Ange from president of the African Tourism Board saying that the continent, that means he means Africa, must protect culture, but of course is an issue everywhere in the world because tourism are not only beaches, they also fall into people exploring cultures and actually adding to behavior in the local community.
Yes.
And of course, this needs to be protected.
And one of the things when you talk about culture is sometimes you can have over tourism or people overrunning if you haven't thought it through. And we're seeing a real example of that in Miami Beach right now, where the spring breakers, thousands came upon Miami. The city put a curfew in yesterday at 8 p.m. and it didn't work. They arrested over 1,000 people, and they're trying to come up with all sorts of ways to allow young people to let off some steam, but not to become super spreaders and not to have brawls in the middle of restaurants or to destroy property. And so there's good tourism and there's bad tourism. And there's ways of going and having a good time, and there are ways of going and being destructive. And that's going to be a real issue, I think, on another level, which is as people have had so much pent-up energy, we may see for a little while people not behaving very well. But protecting culture is essential, because if it's overrun by visitors who commercialize the local culture, then what you have is gone. You know, how many people come to Hawaii and they want to see people in hula skirts and a grass hut, and they don't exist? And how many people want to go to Alaska and meet an Eskimo in an igloo, and they don't exist? And so the perceptions and the realities are often very different, and sometimes that creates anger and even security problems.
And that, of course, falls into what we had discussed on Saturday, what is happiness in tourism, happiness in any business. But on Saturday was the the United Nations Happiness Tourism Day.
Yeah.
And anyone who has not watched our 3-hour segment, it's worth to watch at least part of it. And you find it on eTurboNews if you just scroll up and look for the article, The World Showed Up for Tourism Happiness. You can watch the video, or you can go to livestream.travel. It's definitely worth watching. And one part of this happiness agenda is storytelling. And storytelling, who can tell better stories than tour guides? So if
Yes.
you haven't registered yet, tomorrow morning or tomorrow evening on Eastern Time, we're going to have a segment on storytelling by tour guides. So you will listen to Paul, who is an excellent storyteller from Washington, D.C., leading the session tomorrow. So if you haven't registered, just go to worldtourismevents.com. Worldtourismevents.com is the next event up, and you shouldn't miss it.
Yes. Well, the narrative is the basis of business, and tourism lives or falls on the narrative. So we all spin a story. We're like a spider. A spider spins a web, and we all spin stories about our lives. And if we are able to create stories that interlock with other people's stories, then we create a world of happiness. And that's really what tourism is all about, is the interlocking of stories and the ability to make each other a little bit happy in a world which often has so much tragedy or work that has to be done. The whole tourism industry should really be called the happiness industry. So hopefully when people are listening to this session today, even though we started off by talking about the necessity of security, security only works if we're really happy. So I think that's a nice maybe place to end for the evening. What do you think?
Yeah, no, and appreciate it, Peter. And we're going to talk again later this week.
Yes.
And we're going to play some of the new segments we have from our podcasts into this session, so you can listen to it in case you don't have time to read it. And that's one of the good things here at eTurboNews. If you don't have time to read our articles, just go to eTurboNews.com anyway and click on the symbol to actually listen to the podcast or listen to the article. So every article you see here, you can also listen to. So, yes.
And by the way, in multiple languages, not just in English.
Yeah, listen,
So-
you can only listen in English, but you can actually read our articles
Read
in
it.
more than 60 languages. Just
Right,
click on
so-
your flag, the flag you recognize with the language you wanted to read it. And it's very easy. The translation, of course, is done by a computer, but it's quite good. And just test it. If you're fluent in another language, just click on your flag and see how it sounds in Spanish, Arabic, or German, or Hebrew, or whatever language you speak, and you can judge for yourself.
All right. Well, on that note, let's all be happy, smile, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Aloha. Bye-bye.